Welcome back to the Den of Nerds. I am Josh, and we need to talk about the Thunderbolts movie. Because I'm actually 100% convinced that this will be the best movie Marvel has made in years. And I've got 5 actual reasons why. There's evidence to support my claim. And so we're going to go over those reasons in this video, but there's also a weird tension here because the movie's not tracking well. And despite a lot of us knowing that this literally is some of the best stuff Marvel has ever done, the fan base seems less than interested. So at the end of the video, I'll also talk about why the messages that I'm literally going to go over in this video are not coming across. The fans are not receptive anymore. And I think I know why. So let's begin with reason number 5 as to why I think Thunderbolts is going to be the best Marvel movie in years. And this is the beef team. You've probably been following Marvel Studios enough to realize that they have a system, and they obviously have a lot of creative control with Kevin Feige and their executive team, but they do look for creative teams and collaborating partners when it comes to their different projects, whether it be a show or a movie, and most of the time, this happens in film. And if you will recall, when the Thunderbolts movie was first announced at San Diego Comic-Con in 2019, maybe it was 2020, maybe it was 2021, I'm not 100% sure when they first was announced. Either way, here is the logo and the concept art that was first put in front of us all those years ago. You can see that the costumes for many of the characters look completely different. The text face for the Thunderbolts title looks completely different. And at the time, the concept for this movie was just much more of a sequel to the Black Widow film. And somewhere along the way of developing this film idea, Netflix's Beef show popped off. And Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, seeing the success of that show, approached that creative team and asked them if they could come up with a pitch for the Thunderbolts movie. This includes Lee Sung-jin, the screenwriter and the showrunner for the Beef show, was brought on to rewrite the script for Thunderbolts at the request of director Jake Schreier. And this writer, Lee Sung-jin, took over from Eric Pearson, aiming to infuse the film with more character-driven narratives and ensemble dynamics. And of course, within that statement, we addressed already director Jake Schreier. Jake directed 6 episodes of Beef and is at the helm of the Thunderbolts film as its director. Jake Schreier was actually a little bit of Marvel Studios alum. He was a longtime friend and former college roommate of John Watts, who of course directed the MCU Spider-Man trilogy, and Schreier himself contributed as second unit director on the Los Angeles segments of those Spider-Man films. And the story goes that Jake just had an incredible pitch, absolutely blew Marvel Studios away with his pitch for what Thunderbolts should be. And it was at that point that he was hired on, and he brings on all of the Beef alumni. And it seems like this team was just really able to mesh well within the Marvel system. Grace Young was brought on as the production designer, who of course was also on Beef, and she helped to shape the visual aesthetics of the Thunderbolts. Harry Yoon is on as the editor, who also was the editor on Beef. And you can sort of see this stylized, character-driven conflict type of an aesthetic all over the Thunderbolts movie. And look, we've clearly seen other directors and writers struggle within the Marvel system. Often there's a lot of changes. You have to sort of be dynamic. But I think it's obvious just from looking at the trailers that this Beef team came in and really nailed it. So that cohesiveness that they used to make Beef into such a popular and well-received show obviously fit really well for their work on Thunderbolts. But that takes us to reason number 4 that Thunderbolts is going to be the best Marvel movie in years, and that has to do with the action. The stunt coordination for Thunderbolts was led by Heidi Moneymaker, a veteran stunt performer and a coordinator renowned for her work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She was a big part of Captain America Civil War, Avengers Endgame, and even Guardians of the Galaxy 3. If you think back to a lot of the stunt work for those films, it was incredible. Heidi's sister, Renee Moneymaker, also served as assistant coordinator on the Thunderbolts, and the stunt team included a lot of veterans. This was something that was obvious from one of the very first trailers for Thunderbolts, just how slick the action feels. And this perfectly ties in with the Beef team and the collaborative effort, because Marvel Studios' system is usually really influential on the action for different movies. Like when the Infinity Saga was popping off, there were a lot of directors that would come out and say that directing a Marvel movie was like going to summer camp. Marvel had stunt stunt coordinators, stunt teams, and second unit directors that were essentially already going to film the action, and the directors of the individual movies were more there to put their stylized stamp on it and actually do the hard work of pulling performances out of the actors. In fact, Chad Stahelski, who is now known as like the John Wick guy and maybe one of the greatest action directors of all time, actually started within the Marvel Studios system. Chad Stahelski was the stunt coordinator on some of your favorite Marvel movies from throughout the Infinity Saga, and he was heavily involved in Marvel movies under different studios. He worked on Spider-Man 2, X-Men Origins, Iron Man 2, The Wolverine, and interestingly, he was not only a stunt coordinator, but also a second unit director on Captain America Civil War and Captain America Winter Soldier. So the fact that Marvel brought one of their greatest stunt people from old movies to work with this fresh new team in the Beef Team seems like a magic formula. The movie's action seems so slick and stylized and fun, and it just fits with the aesthetic of the film, but also the expectations of me as a big Marvel fan. Oh, I miss the crazy action sequences during the Russo brothers Infinity Saga run. Those movies, the action, they're so iconic, and you can just see it in the trailers and in the promotional material for this Thunderbolts film. They've got that feeling back again. But that takes us to the number 3 reason that Thunderbolts is about to be the best Marvel movie in years, and it has to do with the character stuff. Remember that Jake Schreier's actual pitch to come on to this movie had all to do with the characters. And the truth is, even though this is a band of rather unpopular Marvel characters like C and D level characters, they all have really interesting chemistry and backstory drama together. They're all super soldiers. They've all come to a point in life where they're lacking meaning. They all have family drama. They're all a bit unstable. And it just feels like the perfect formula of characters to struggle through a film together and find their heroic version. And on top of that, they're all really good actors. Again, I think these are less popular characters, which might have something to do with why the film is tracking so low right now. But I do think all of these actors are incredibly talented. Like, this is a really good cast. And a lot of this is, of course, anchored in the Sentry character, because Sentry is like a crazy version of all of the other characters. Sentry is a super soldier. Sentry is being used by other powerful forces out there. Sentry probably doesn't even want to be Sentry. And so in a way, the Sentry in the Void is an allegory for the darkness that is enshrouding all of these different characters. And from what I have heard, without getting into spoilers, that exact thread will be heavily played on in the third act of this movie in a very visually interesting way. A lot of the modern Marvel movies are lacking this serious character stuff and this heart. Like, Captain America Brave New World is so paper thin as a plot that I don't really know how to feel about the struggles that Sam is facing. And instead of feeling like I was watching Sam Wilson go through an actual struggle, it felt more like I was in the back seat with Sam Wilson going through experiences. And in the Infinity Saga, these movies and the conflicts within them are so much more anchored to the actual characters, the character flaws of the different players, and it all just leads to a more satisfying and fulfilling conclusion to the arcs and to the stories. And I seriously think you're getting a whole bunch of that in this movie. But that takes us to the number 2 reason as to why I think this movie is going to be the best Marvel movie in years, and it has to do with the test screenings. So a couple of things you got to know about the test screenings over at Marvel Studios. First off, yeah, they do a lot of testing over there. Mostly it's internal screen testing. So friends and family, people that work at the studio, they all get together and they watch the cut, and then they get feedback from those people and they adjust the films. However, recently Marvel Studios has been so uncertain about the quality of some of their movies that they have actually done public test screenings. This was done for The Marvels. This was done for Quantumania. This was done for Captain America Brave New World. Now, this is interesting because it's a sort of double-edged sword here. You do get a lot more feedback from people when you do public test screenings, but it also shows a serious lack of confidence in the movies from the studio side. And it also leads to a lot of leaks. So that's why there were so many crazy leaks for Quantumania, The Marvels, and for Captain America Brave New World. And there are less so prevalent leaks for Thunderbolts, even though there are plenty of leaks out there. But that shows that Marvel Studios is way more confident in this film than they have been for many of these other big projects. And beyond that, we have also heard from various insiders and scoopers that the internal test screenings for Thunderbolts have gone fantastically. Marvel Studios knows they have an incredible movie on their hands. And I want to stop for a second and explain why that's really important. When it came to the Marvels, we basically covered for 2+ years how the screenings were bad, how Marvel wasn't confident in the movie, and it ended coming out and being pretty bad. Same thing with Captain America Brave New World, same thing with a lot of their shows. It's gotten to the point with the insiders and the scoopers and the leaks where we basically know how people are thinking about these different movies. And using all of those same sources, using all of that same sense-making apparatus, we get a completely different story for the Thunderbolts. All we've heard is how happy they are at the movie, how they're thrilled at how good it turned out, how they're really freaking excited for fans to see this film. So we kind of literally know that Marvel believes this movie is way better than a lot of other stuff they've done, which is wild. That takes us to the #1 reason that you should believe that Thunderbolts is the best Marvel movie made in years. And it has to do with the review embargo. Marvel Studios is lifting the social media embargo on April 22nd. That's next week. And the review embargo lifts on the 29th. Now, this might seem like a crazy thing to bring up, but the last time Marvel Studios had review embargoes lift that far away from a release was for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The pattern for the last several Marvel movies has been to release the embargo in the middle of the day on Wednesday. And what that usually creates is an unclear picture of what the Rotten Tomatoes score will end up being. And on top of that, that really only gave people that saw the premiere a couple of days to figure out how they felt about it. And I think what Marvel was trying to do with those other movies was have the premiere, have the social influence and the social media embargo paint a really positive picture. And then they were hoping that would translate into more positive reviews for the actual projects. That didn't end up happening. In fact, you would see this pattern over and over again where there were pretty decent early social media reviews, and then once the actual Rotten Tomatoes scores started rolling in, they were terrible. And on top of that, the Rotten Tomatoes scores were of course released like a day before the movie came out. When Marvel Studios pushes the review embargo all the way into Wednesday afternoon, it makes it so it's not exactly clear how good or bad the film is by the time people are going to see it preview night on Thursday. Like, I know for sure because I do this all the time. I look at all the reviews and I go see these movies all the time on the Thursday preview day. And I'm just telling you, this single day actually means quite a bit. As opposed to what felt like Marvel trying to hide the Rotten Tomatoes scores, this feels like Marvel is incredibly proud of the Rotten Tomatoes scores, or at least what they think those Rotten Tomatoes scores will be. And my God, they better hope those scores are really good because this movie's tracking kind of badly right now. So that brings us to the last part of the video here, because I just laid out all these 5 different reasons why I think the Thunderbolts movie is going to be the best Marvel movie in years. And I'm actually serious, guys. Like, I'm incredibly excited to see this movie. I think it's going to bring back that old Marvel feeling. I'm going to actually enjoy my time in the theater. I'm going to have laughs. I'm going to be wowed by the action. I'm going to be moved by the character stuff. It feels like this movie has all of the important pieces to be a massive hit with the fan base. Here's the problem. This movie is tracking poorly. And I think part of the reason why is because Marvel Studios has continuously tried to convince us that some of the movies and some of the shows that are frankly not very good are actually very good. This started all the way back with Quantumania, where they were pulling out Thanos into certain clips for the promotion, trying to get us to think that Quantumania was as important as an Avengers movie. Like, that was literally in some of the promos. Same thing with the Marvels. They come out and say that the Marvels is this incredibly important movie. I believe they used archived footage of a line from Thanos that we never heard in any of the movies to try to sell that thing. And with Captain America Brave New World, they kept talking about how important the movie was, how good it was, how much of a big deal it was. And frankly, even when it comes to Daredevil Born Again, this show tried to sell us that this creative overhaul was massive, that Marvel had actually fixed this thing, and that Daredevil was going to be incredible. And from what I have seen, people are really divided on Daredevil Born Again. And if you look at the viewership numbers for Daredevil Born Again, they're terrible. This show never cracked into Nielsen's top 10 for originals or overall. I mean, it is literally performing worse than The Acolyte, which is a show that got canceled. So Daredevil is not performing well for Marvel at all. And I think all of these things are connected. It's kind of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Marvel's been releasing mid for years, and yet they keep overhyping all of this mid, and they keep trying to sell us on the idea that this one's actually going to be good. And it's so ironic that the first movie out of that entire bunch that might truly set a unique tone, be incredible in the ways that I think fans are dying for these movies to be incredible, and yet it might underperform. It might flop in the box office. However, I'll leave you with a little bit of hope here, because Guardians of the Galaxy 3 actually underperformed in its initial weekend. And I think that's a similar story. Fans were also just fatigued, and they were upset about Quantumania and Phase 4 in general. But Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was so good that it had incredibly strong word of mouth and really high Rotten Tomato score. And what that translated to was great business in week 2 for the movie. Strong word of mouth led to incredible box office in the long term, which saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3 become one of the most successful movies of that year, getting up to $950 million. Now, the problem with Thunderbolts is it's just starting at so much of a lower starting point. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy were big characters within the Infinity Saga. James Gunn and his Guardians movies were big successes, so people loved those characters. And Thunderbolts is literally coming in like less than half of what the opening box office was for Guardians, but I think the same logic applies. If this movie's incredible, like I think it will be, I would expect strong word of mouth to drive people to see it in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully it outpaces and outperforms Brave New World. Because if it doesn't, Marvel has to take a hard look in the mirror and understand that the actual quality of their movies might not actually be enough to get fans back into the theaters. And they're going to have a weird internal discussion over what they're willing to do and what they're willing to let go of in order to get people back in the theater. But that's a conversation to be had after we realize how Thunderbolts is actually performing in the theaters. Like I said, I'm excited for it. Let me know if you're excited for the movie in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.